A few weeks ago, I took a chance and ventured into the world of dude bro dad fiction with mostly mixed results. And so I thought I would veer off in a completely different direction and try my hand at some manga. And what can I say? I just need some lighter fare in my literary diet. I've really got that late winter blah's seasonal affective disorder mixed in with a little bit of cabin fever after being locked up for the past 2 years. Fuzzy brain. So yes, something a little lighter. And while this is probably mostly duh for the rest of you, I'm just starting to realize that manga is completely mainstream. I have to admit, I had some sort of outdated and antiquated notions of manga, that this was something that Weibo neckbeards obsessed over, hoping to learn Japanese so that one day they could drag their Cheeto-stained fingers, fly across over to Japan and visit some maid cafe. Manga sales have exploded. 2020 saw a 43% increase in manga sales over the prior year. 2021, 20% of all adult fiction was represented by comics and graphic novels. And that aspect of sales is completely dominated by manga titles. Bookscan's list of the top-selling graphic novels is completely dominated by manga. For quarter after quarter, all top 20 slots are manga titles. The only time I've seen a traditional cape and cowl break into the top 20 was a single issue of the Batman Fortnite crossover graphic novel series, which, saying out loud, makes me feel old all over again. Honestly, that's a bit surprising given the sheer ubiquity of superhero movies out there. I mean, they are everywhere. Chloe Zhao wins an Academy Award for Best Director, and her reward is she gets to direct a Marvel movie. I mean, it seems like DC Marvel comic book machine is chewing up everyone. But I guess movie and TV success doesn't necessarily translate to comic book sales. And, well, frankly, I guess I get it. I mean, it is just the same stories over and over again. Batman is going to face the Joker, people are going to die, but ultimately justice is served. And frankly, that story gets a little exhausting after a while. But with manga, we have a wide variety of stories out there for them to explore. You've got manga on volleyball or going to college, giant monsters eating people, or superheroes just looking for grocery sales. With manga, you're usually invested in a singular artist, writer, vision for the duration of the entire run, which is certainly not the case with North American cape and cowl comics. I mean, okay, I want to get ready for the new Batman movie. What do I read? I don't know who's writing for Batman right now. Do I go back and try out Scott Snyder's New 52 run, or Tom King's exploration of the relationship between Catwoman and Batman, or maybe Grant Morrison's weird take where he introduces us to Damian Wayne and Batcow? And that's to say nothing of the graphic novels. You've got Sean Murphy's White Knight, Jeff Loeb's Long Halloween, or Alan Moore's Killing Joke. I mean, there's just a lot of choice out there, and not all the stories are killer or great every time out. Which also, it isn't exactly easy to dive into manga either. It's a little intimidating. There is an abundance of choice, and the section at our local retailer has only grown over the years. So I brought my daughter along to help me out, to introduce me to the world of manga, and it became very clear this was going to be easier said than done. I mean, Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia only had like late volumes available, and Jujutsu Kaisen had like volumes 2 and 5, but there was no sign of volume 1. So we ended up with Junji Ito's Uzumaki because it was this beautiful deluxe edition bind-up that captured the entire story from beginning to end. And it just seemed like the perfect introduction to manga. Ito is a bit of a comic book rock star. He is the first manga artist to win an Eisner for Best Writer/Artist Combination. And it's not always necessarily the same person as it was for Ito, as well as Frank Miller's run on Sin City. But this includes luminaries like Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore's work on Watchmen, and Mike Mignola and John Byrne's work on Hellboy. Ito has a cameo as himself in the video game Death Stranding. I mean, he is kind of a big deal. He is the Stephen King of manga horror, and with Uzumaki, I can totally see why. Kairi Goshima is returning to her hometown, where she encounters in an alley her friend's father, Mr. Saito, obsessed with a snail crawling up the side of her wall, just intent on the spiral pattern of its shell. Things spiral quickly out of control from there. Mr. Saito becomes obsessed with the shape, and spirals start appearing everywhere in town. Okay, maybe that doesn't exactly elicit a lot of horrors, but things escalate very quickly from there. We're introduced to snail people, dueling sentient hair, human jack-in-the-boxes, and deadly mosquitoes. Which again, said out loud, doesn't exactly elicit a lot of fear. But let me tell you, Uzumaki just gets under your skin. In large part, it's because of Ito's illustrative style. And again, I admit I'm a bit of a manga noob, so I did come in with some preconceived notions, expecting things like big Disney-fied eyes, pixie noses, wild hair, and lots of action lines in a Naruto-style manga. But Ito renders his characters in a more traditional, straight-ahead format, which means when things take a darker, more ominous turn, it is all the more frightening. Ito is a master of body horror and renders it beautifully on the page. I mean, there are some unforgettable, classic visuals here. There are panels in this manga that fans have tattooed on their body. The bind-up here is a collection of short stories that all revolve around this notion of the spiral, and yeah, there are a few misses here and there. I mean, it does require quite a bit of suspension of disbelief. I mean, after the events of the first chapter, I would have noped out of town on the first bus instead of going to school the next day that Kairi does. And by the third chapter, not only would I have dropped out of school, I would likely need to be institutionalized. But of course, I'm happy to suspend some disbelief here and have Kairi anchor me throughout this stories. The thing is super creepy and I loved it. And admittedly, it gets a little too Lovecraftian at the end, but whatever. I loved hanging out in the super creepy town, so much so that I went to the library to see if I could find some of Junji Ito's earlier works and was rewarded with 2 short story manga collections called Venus in the Blind Spot, as well as Deserter. And you can see a lot of the themes that Ito explores in Uzumaki being poked at in his earlier works, and you can see how his artistic style has progressed over the years. To be fair, in his early going, he was still juggling his career as a dental technician while he was writing and illustrating manga horror. I really enjoyed the story, The Enigma of the Amagira Fault, that was in Venus in the Blind Spot. And I mean, it starts off unassuming enough. There's an earthquake in a small Japanese town, and it reveals this section of a mountain that has human-shaped holes in it. These holes have clearly been there for centuries before being covered up. So scientists arrive, and with the holes, they can discern no bottom or end to these holes with the available equipment they have. But then soon people start showing up, obsessed with the idea of finding their hole, finding the shape that fits them and only them. And pretty soon people find their hole and just smoothly get sucked into the mountain, which is just all kinds of creepy, and I loved it, and clearly other people did too. I noticed that there is even an homage to it in a Steven Universe episode called Kindergarten. Anyway, I've barely scratched the surface here as far as manga goes. All this talk of manga has made me realize that I haven't picked up a comic in years now. I wanted to see what Batman was up to, so I'm pleased to find that Chip Zdarsky will be taking over the main title in July. He of Sex Criminals fame, and is also responsible for a great run on the Fantastic Four, who I find is notoriously difficult to write for. Anyway, I mentioned that, and then Justin Ghostreader over on the Discord said I need to pick up Chip Zdarsky's storyline on Spider-Man called Life Story, so another comic that I'm going to need to check out when I get the chance. Speaking of the Discord, we're continuing traveling the world. We just in February finished our choice for the Netherlands, which was My Father's Notebook, which I really did enjoy. In March, we're going off to Germany to read Herta Muller's The Hunger Angel. The Workbook Club introduced me to my first Taylor Jenkins read with Malibu Rising. And yes, I know, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is supposed to be the better book, but Malibu Rising was fine. It was just fine. And for the month of March, we're going to be reading Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, which I've only heard great things about. It'll be a nice little slip into nonfiction while I intersperse it with a bit of manga and comics just to keep that fuzzy brain at bay. Hopefully you are keeping your fuzzy brain at bay, avoiding any reading slumps, enjoying what it is that you are reading. So until I talk to you again, have a great week or weeks of reading. Bye.